when you can't see your kids and you can't talk to your kids and you basically die with your eyes open and your whole world goes on without you in it and all you can do is watch, you tell me how luxurious it is. It's not.
Former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik on MSNBC's Morning Joe, defending against claims his time in prison might have been luxurious because it was at a minimum security facility. His time spent behind bars is the subject of his new book. Let's take a good look at that cover. The book is entitled From Jailer to Jailed. Definitely attracting a lot of interest, no doubt headed for the bestseller list, and a great read from the pen or the word processor, or more importantly, the experience of Bernard Kerik, who joins us via Skype, and also with us from Newsmax Washington, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. Bernie, let's begin with your motivation behind telling your story in this way at this time. Why now?
Well, here's the thing, JD. I've been in law enforcement my entire life since I was 18 years old. And I reached the pinnacle of my career as the police commissioner, as a presidential cabinet nominee for Homeland Security in 2004. And then there was an enormous decline as a result of the investigations and my conviction. And I thought I knew the criminal justice system. I thought I knew it well, as many Americans probably think they know it well too. However, I got to prison and I realized I didn't know half of what I should have known. And I learned a lot. And I think the American people should know what this system consists of, how economically destructive it is to America, how it damages and destroys societies. And most importantly, I think the legislators should know who create the laws they create. And right now, more than ever before, there is a bipartisan effort from both sides of the aisle to really look at the criminal justice system in America and try to fix it.
Bernie, you spent 4 years in prison. Talk to me about solitary confinement and what you would do if you were in charge of prisons again to really reform them and change them, the inner workings of the prisons themselves.
You know what, Ford, there's a purpose and a use for solitary confinement. And basically, and I ran Rikers Island for 6 years. I took it from one of the most mismanaged and dangerous and violent jail systems in the country to an international model for efficiency and accountability and safety. And there's a use for solitary. If you have threats to an institution, if you have threats to staff, threats to national security, escape risks, there may be a use for it. But when you take young men who commit institutional infractions and you stick them in solitary, I went to solitary confinement, I was told, for protective custody. It is mind-altering. It is cruel and unusual punishment for people to be put in solitary with no real purpose, with no real need, that are not a threat to the institution or staff. You hallucinate, you talk to yourself, I mean, it is, no one understands what it's like until you've been there. And we in this country use it way too much. And I think the legislators, I think state legislators, I think the American Correctional Association and people that create the rules and regulations and the laws for institutions, I think they have to look at what we do to people. You know, you create monsters in prison, and I think sometimes we forget they got to go back to society. Most people that are in prison are returning back to society. Do we want them returning back to society warped? No, I don't think so.
Well, mindful of that, Bernie, and again, we could not stress enough, your book, From Jailer to Jailed, offers your journey in a very candid fashion, and there's so many facets to this story that we want to pick it back up with you in just a minute here. Especially the talk about solitary confinement, even when you're not in solitary confinement, just how alone you can be in jail. People who show up to visit and people who stay away. We hope you'll show up following the break as we have more with Bert.
And then I went into a system and I learned that we are putting young, first-time, nonviolent drug offenders in prison for 10, 15, 20 years for like 5 grams of cocaine. It's like 2 sugar packs in a Dunkin' Donut shop.
Former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik on MSNBC's Morning Joe, talking about a change in perspective, especially about low-level drug offenders who are being locked up. Bernie, of course, the author of the new book, From Jailer to Jail, soon to be a bestseller, guaranteed great read, and certainly a captivating conversation that we will continue with Bernie now as he Skypes in from New Jersey, and from Newsmax Washington, strategist Ford O'Connell. Bernie, we'll get to the level of punishment, but I wanted to return to the notion of visitors in prison, your own personal experience. Were you visited, and did you get some pleasant surprises and perhaps some not so pleasant surprises in terms of visitation?
No, I had, a lot of my friends that I had before I went away, they stuck by me. They came to visit me, my family, my children, most importantly. And then there were people that weren't there. And, for whatever reason, keep in mind, I was 6 hours away from New York City, which was problematic in itself. But, there were a lot of good friends that were there and stood by me.
Bernie, talk to me about your political relationships and your political friends. I understand that you were very tight with the former mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Did any of your political allies come and visit you when you were in prison? Because we know that political relationships never last forever.
Well, listen, first of all, my relationship with the mayor, with Giuliani, was far more than just political. I worked for him for 8 years in the NYPD, and when I ran Rikers. I also had a company together with him, and he was the godfather to my 2 youngest daughters, Celine and Angelina. And when the federal investigation started, we created distance, but there was never closure on that distance, and we haven't really talked since. And I get it. He's a political figure. He's, I just personally, I wish that he would have been there for my children in my absence. He never called or, contacted my family or anything. So it was, it is what it is. And, but there were other political figures, major political figures. Peter King, the chairman for the Homeland Security Committee, he came down every 3, 4, 5 months for the whole time I was there. He came to see me. The former chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, Dick Grasso, he visited a number of other people. But, listen, it is what it is, and I try not to look back and dwell on it. But, I'm home, and I can take care of my kids now on my own, and that's what counts.
Bernie, a minute 30 remains, and let's return to the topic that we heard you talking about on MSNBC, and that is prison terms for low-level drug offenders. In the minute 30 that remains, what key reforms need to be made in your mind?
But it's not just drug offenders, JD. It's people that go to prison that don't need prison to learn their lesson or pay for their mistakes. You have commercial fishermen that caught too many fish or the fish was too big. You have people in prisons in America today that went hunting and shot the wrong animal at the wrong time, or used the wrong size or type of arrow bow hunting. You have these young first-time nonviolent drug offenders sitting in prison for 10, 15 years. It is destroying society. People belong in prison. I put a lot of people in prison. Bad people that did bad things. They tried to kill me. They tried to kill men I worked with, killed partners of mine. I seized millions of drug proceeds and tons of cocaine from them. But then I went to prison and I met all these other people that really could have been dealt with by paying fines and paying restitution and home confinement and work release and paying taxes and taking care of their families. Yet, what are they doing? They're sitting in prison, costing the American taxpayer billions of dollars over the reported cost of incarceration.
And we'll leave it
It's
there,
not good
Bernie.
for America.
In money well spent if you go get the book From Jailer to Jail by Bernie Kerik. We're coming back on America's Forum.